Hello, Flight Simmers. This is your captain speaking. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today than what we normally do. I'm going to be taking a look at the Pilot2ATC application. A new version has come out recently that supports the flight simulator, the new version of Flight Simulator. And I've had this program for a while, but I stopped using it because it had some difficulties for me. It just didn't work out the way that I thought it would, and so I quit using it. But getting back into flight simulation now with the new version of Flight Simulator, I've become more interested in the ATC, and Pilot2ATC is a good substitute for the ATC that's within the simulator. There are some problems still with it for at least the moment. The flight plans that are created within Pilot2ATC are not automatically uploaded into the simulator, and at this point I'm not sure that the flight plans are compatible with simulator flight plans. It will save, the new version will save a Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 version of the flight plan, but I'm not certain that the waypoints that are available within Pilot2ATC match the waypoints that are available within the simulator. And so even if you take the flight plan that Pilot2ATC creates and upload it into the simulator, it may not be an exact match when you look at the simulator flight plan and the flight plan within Pilot2ATC. However, that being said, there are some features within Pilot2ATC that are useful even if you don't use all the features for Pilot2ATC, even if you don't use the ATC part of it. For example, one of the features in Pilot2ATC is the ability to control the autopilot. And I'm going to be looking at the autopilot feature of Pilot2ATC in today's video and testing it out with the flight simulator to see how well it works. Also, you can control the COM1, COM2, NAV1, NAV2 from Pilot2ATC, and we'll be looking at that as well to see how well it works with the simulator. And then finally, you can see your aircraft on a map, and there are several different map versions. Let me just make this full screen so that you can see this how this looks. And I'll close the flight plan part so we have the full screen open here. There are several different versions of the map that you can use when you are flying, and I haven't seen that in anything else. For example, down here are the different map versions that are available. You can see the low altitude IFR routes. You can see the high altitude routes, and I'm not sure exactly, I think clicking a second time adds features that I'm not seeing here for the moment. Let me just okay, you have to zoom in order to get the route names. If you click it again, well, okay, all this does is enable that map. The same thing is true for the low altitude maps. If you zoom out far enough, then you lose the route names, but you can still see the routes. Then there is this relief map that shows you somewhat of a three-dimensional version of the world, where you can see the mountains and things of that nature, but you have to be kind of climbed in. You can see where the valleys are at and everything. Of course, you ought to know what a relief map is all about. Then actually there are a couple of relief maps. This terrain is a similar map to the relief map, where the terrain is visible on here. This one I like. This is the OpenStreetMap road map, and so you can see on this map, you can see the roads and things, which would be very useful for VFR flying. So you can find roads where you are flying through and so on. Then there is a satellite map that you can use, and you can drill down in here, and that gives you a visual representation of what the ground looks like in the area where you're flying. And then finally there is a map for charts. And if you zoom in too much, or if you zoom in all the way, you get just the standard OpenStreetMap. But if you zoom out a little bit, eventually you'll get the charts that are available for the area where you're flying. And all of the U.S. is charted. I don't think anything else in the world is charted. But all of the U.S. is charted within the map and available for your use. And I haven't seen that in any other VFR type map or IFR type map that is available for use. And so if you use Pilot2ATC just for that, it would be, well, it may be worth acquiring. So it has the ATC features that if you can work with those and make them work for what you're doing, then all these other things are just icing on the cake. And if you can't use the ATC part, like I may be in that area, then all these other features are still pretty nice to have. So let's take a look now. I think I'll go back here to the street map. I'm going to be opening this up in a few minutes to see my plane, where it's at currently in Corpus Christi. I don't have to do this actually, because I can do this I can get here by some of the map features that are available within the application, but I'm going to go ahead and scroll there so you can see my map, my airplane, as soon as it comes up. All right, first what we'll do is we will go into the simulator, take a look in the simulator, and look at the G1000 and the Cessna 172 and see how the AP works. Then we'll see how the AP tool works within Pilot2ATC. So let's take a look at the G1000. Move this here so we can look at all the controls easily here, and that should suffice us. All right, now when the G1000 first comes up, of course it comes up with the autopilot disabled, and you see nothing up here that's indicated within the autopilot line that shows the status of the autopilot. So let's just see what happens when we do various things within the G1000. First of all, we'll just turn the autopilot on, and the autopilot comes up by default in roll mode with pitch attitude held, and when you turn it off, those indicators are hidden from view. Now, the heading button, if you click it, it will sync the heading bug to the current direction of the airplane. And that doesn't work all the time. If you're up in the air for some reason, it always seems to be over to the right or the left by a few degrees, but it'll get you pretty close to your heading, and then you can adjust it with by turning the heading knob up here. If I click the heading button, then I'll see heading up here in this box. Autopilot is still turned off, but pitch mode is also enabled. And so basically, if I turn the autopilot on now, then the autopilot, which is going to follow the current heading, and the pitch mode will be enabled. I'm going to go ahead and turn autopilot off. Now, if I turn GPS, if I click the nav button, that's what I want to do. If I click the nav button now, interesting thing happens here is that the GPS indicator we see up here in white. That means it's armed, but it is not yet enabled. And the reason it's not enabled is because we don't have a flight plan. And so I'm going to create a real quick flight plan here, quick and dirty, just by opening up the Direct to window. And I'm just going to take the first option that comes up. I'll accept that, and then I'll click enter again to activate that. And that activates the flight plan. I've got a flight plan now with well, I guess it's not part of a flight plan, but I'm still got a direct to location. So I'm going to 0010 Nancy. I guess that's November, isn't it? 0010 November. And the GPS pointer is pointing to that indicator. And so now GPS or nav mode is enabled with the GPS mode. If I click CDI, then I get VOR, as VOR1 is what the CDI is now using. And but I lose the nav mode. If I want nav mode now, I'll click nav mode again. And for some reason nav mode is not coming on. Oh, because my VOR is not tuned. I'm not tuned to a nav radio, so I can't enable VOR1. That's the reason for that. Otherwise, we would see nav. Let's see. We would see VOR mode here and HDG here. But VOR that means it's armed but it's not ready, and we're in HDG mode. But if I disable HDG, the heading mode, then we don't go into VOR, we go back to roll. So heading, if you're in heading mode, VOR will show as being armed. And if we ever get a nav connection established, then this VOR would be enabled. So let me just go ahead and turn back to GPS, and the autopilot will be working as normal. So we can switch between heading mode and nav mode just by clicking these buttons. For VS mode, VS mode is used to climb or descend. If you click VS mode, then VS is enabled, and it takes the current speed of your ascent or descent, which is currently at 0 feet per minute. And you can use these buttons to increase or decrease the speed of your altitude change. For some reason I can't change this one now. Oh, the reason I can't change it is because when I got to 0, no, I don't know why I can't change it. Very interesting. Anyway, somewhere in this process I got back. Maybe I hit the VS button by mistake. But the VS mode is set to 500 or whatever. You'll see it up here and also over here when that changes. And that's the way VS mode works. And let me turn VS mode off. We use flight level change and check this out. That's similar to VS mode, except that the flight level change is used to hold the speed of the aircraft until a certain altitude is reached. So we're back to altitude at 0 feet again. Let me see if I can make the flight map turned on. And I can't because altitude is already at 0, so it's not going to allow me to change. But let's change the altitude. We'll change the altitude with this button, and we change it in thousands of feet using the large button. So now the altitude that's selected is 5,000 feet. And then now I can hit VSC mode, or FLC, and FLC starts out at the current speed of the aircraft. This is the current indicated airspeed. You can change that with these buttons as well. And so we want to increase this, say, to, let's say to 84 knots. And what this will do is it'll try to hold the aircraft speed at 84 knots until the until the selected until the selected altitude is reached, and then the altitude setting would be enabled, and so on. So that's how all these buttons work. The important buttons here. We could look at VNAV mode, but until that's actually working in the simulator, I don't think it's worth being too concerned about. Of course, the flight director button works by turning the flight director on or off. Altitude button, we looked at that. Oh, I guess we didn't look at that. Altitude sets it to the current altitude plus or minus 50 feet so that you end up with a 100 value here. We are currently, let's make sure that the barometer is set correctly. It says currently that we're at about 45 feet, and I pressed altitude and it just went up to 100 feet and said, okay, that's where we're going to try to keep the aircraft. And so that's the altitude setting there. So that's the way that works. VNAV, back course, we're not going to be concerned about that. So we've looked at all of these different buttons and how they function within the aircraft. So let's turn altitude off. See if I can clear all this stuff now. No. So roll's going to stay on. Sometimes I can't figure out when these things are cleared out completely and when they're not, but we'll leave that the way it is and not worry about that little thing there. So let me go back to get that page cleared out. All right, Now, in Pilot2ATC, in order for Pilot2ATC's Autopilot and COM buttons to work, radio devices to work, you have to be connected to the machine. You have to be connected to the SIM, and it's connected. Let me see if I've got this tool running. I don't think I do. I may have to do something here, but let me try to go in and find my tools that I have to have running. FSU IPC7 has to be running, and that is coming up now. Looks like this and shows that it's connected. So now that it's connected, let's see if we can connect Pilot2ATC. I may have to go out of Pilot2ATC and come back in before I can connect, but let's see. Yeah, it's not responding now. And so this little application has to be running before Pilot2ATC is started in order to connect. So the order in which things have to happen is the simulator has to be started first, then FSU IPC7 has to be running. Well, look here. What does it say?
3526, contact departure 1288.
Oh, we actually got in. Simulator connected, recognition engine installed, and grammars loaded. Those three things have to appear in order for everything to work. And so we are running, and we can actually hear the background ATC working with these with the COM, the way the COM works. So I want to try to see something. I think no, that just changes from COM1 to COM2. I mean from the active to the standby. Somewhere here, I thought there was a way to get to the. That's not what I intended. Somewhere there's a way to get to.
Jet Airways 234 heavy tower, caution turbulence, heavy landed ahead, wind calm. Here's dash 8 departing.
Standby maybe. Here we go. Come here, and let me get rid of my camera here. I forgot that was on. Let me make sure so that doesn't get in the way of what we're doing. Now we can turn the volume down on that chatter, and we'll just mute it so it doesn't bother us anymore. Okay. Well, let's see, somebody, it didn't mute. Okay.
S649, contact departure 1288.
As soon as I close this thing, the mute.
711 Delta 4, cross runway 24 right. Delta 4, cross 24 right, camp 711.
Mute button does not work. How about the volume button? Okay, I was able to click down on the volume to get that stuff turned off, but the mute button was not working. Okay, here's the button to open up the autopilot. When that opens up, you get a little dialog box like this, it opens. That has controls for the heading, course, airspeed, altitude, vertical speed. Then there are buttons for decreasing and increasing each of these 5 values. The little button that looks like pause button here, that is to set the current value, whatever it is, into each one of these. We'll see how that works in a moment. And then there are these buttons over here to enable different modes with the Autopilot. And let's see how they work with the Autopilot in the simulator. I'm going to click on the AP, or the Autopilot symbol, and Autopilot is turned on as you would expect. And so that's the way we want that to work. If I click it again, it's disabled, and we hear that the Autopilot has been disabled within the simulator. If I click HDG, we get the heading mode to be enabled, which is as you would expect. If I click it again, heading mode is disabled. We go back to roll. If I click nav, GPS is indicated over here because we're on the GPS arrow. If I click nav again, go back to roll. If I click Alt, the altitude hold mode is on at 100 feet because we are basically at 100 feet above sea level, or in round numbers we are. Click Alt again, that goes away. If I click indicated airspeed, I don't have an indicated airspeed over here. And nothing over here changes when I click indicated airspeed or when I unclick it. Now, I expected that indicated airspeed would be the same as the FLC button, but it does not behave the way the FLC button behaves. However, let's look at, we'll just leave that for now and come back to it. If I see the flight director is already enabled, and the flight director is enabled over here. If I click it, the flight director over here goes away. Click it again, it comes back. Now, LVL mode, the level mode, is different. If we click that, we get a level mode over here instead of roll. Click it, level mode again, roll comes back. Approach should behave the same as the APP button does over here, or the APR, but we're not in a situation where this makes sense, so I can't test that. So we'll just ignore that for now. How about VS mode? If I click VS mode here, it's enabled, but I don't see anything over here. Nothing VS mode over here. One of the reasons for that, though, is because we're already at the indicated airspeed. We're already at 100. If this were at a different altitude, then maybe the VS mode would work. So let's turn that off now. And let's test these over here, and we'll come back to the VS mode. Heading indicator is currently 311 degrees, so that's correct. If I use these buttons, then I can move the heading bug to a different location on the dial. I can also click heading bug here, and I can type in from my keyboard now a heading that I'm interested in, and then click enter, and that heading now is pointing to 125 degrees, 125 degrees. The course button is set to 0. We look over here, it says course is 7. Now why are those different? Well, let's take a look. if I click, well, the course right now is based on this arrow, and that's 87, not 07, but it's 87. That's based upon this GPS needle being pointed to 87. If I click the CDI needle to go to VOR1, now VOR1 is set to 0. This course is set to 0. If I go in here and set a new course, it's set 55, and click enter, this becomes 55, and now VOR1 is set to 55 the way you expect. If I click enter, click this button again, that goes to VOR2. VOR2 is now looking at 0, but the course indicator over here is still set to 55. Let's click this again and type in 145 now. Well, let's back up and go 145, enter, and nothing happens over here. Let's look over here and clicking CDI again. There's GPS still looking at 87, and now the VOR1 is now pointing to 145 degrees. 145. So this course indicator is only for VOR1. It's not for the GPS mode. That has no effect upon that, and has no effect upon the VOR2 arrow. So that's good to know. Airspeed. Let's take a look. Airspeed. We looked at this before. Airspeed, we set 84 knots for the FLC mode, and FLC mode was changed to 54 knots. But now when I click the FLC mode, this goes back, as it ought to, goes back to the current airspeed. And FLC mode is disabled because we're already at the selected selected altitude. Let's change the selected altitude again to 4,000. Click enter. Now select the FLC mode. Well, there is no FLC mode over here, but we select FLC mode over here. That's at 0 now. And we'll change the airspeed. Let's just change it to 75. And now the FLC mode is set to 75. So let's, so I can change the airspeed for the FLC mode, but I can't turn the FLC mode on from Pilot2ATC. So let's disable FLC mode. Let's enable vertical speed. And still we don't see anything. I thought I'm still in FLC mode. I thought I clicked that. Okay. FLC, vertical speed, click that. And it doesn't look like I can turn on the vertical speed mode from the autopilot here either. So this button does not work, at least not currently. But the vertical speed button, or the vertical speed value for the for vertical speed, does work. So if I click vertical speed, see, it picked up the 300 from here, and we've got 300 up here. Vertical speed 300, 300 over here, and so the vertical speed is turned on, and it was even indicated up here that it was turned on, but I couldn't turn it on from here, and I can't turn it off from there. I have to turn it off. If I'm going to turn it off, I have to turn it off there. So you can see that I can change the indicator, but I can't actually control it from there. So that's good to know. It looks like then that the indicated airspeed, if this is the same thing as FLC, it's not working. So the indicated airspeed button is not working. The vertical speed button is not working. We don't really know about VNAV or the approach mode buttons. We'll have to test those out when we're in the air sometime. But the rest of these buttons seem to work. Altimeter, nav, heading, autopilot enabled, flight director, and even the level button that we don't have over here. We don't have the level button over here, but I can turn level mode on from here, so that's kind of interesting. All right, and all of this works over here. We can change the heading, course, airspeed, altitude, and VS just fine. Now let's take a look at our radio information. Radio information is down here. And let's compare it with what we've got in the simulator. And I'm going to zoom in on this, make it a little easier to see. And we'll look first of all at these nav values. Nav 1 is set at 110.50. The active nav 1 is 110.50, so that's correct. And the standby is 113.90. 113.90 is the standby on nav 1. The nav 2 is like the nav 1. Now, there is no indication over here of what the nav 2 values are. So let's click and see if we can change the from between the two navs. Nav 2, if I click that, enables nav 2. It says it's enabled, but it does not appear to be enabled over here. In order to change between nav 1 and nav 2, we toggle it with this. So toggle between them. Now nav 2 is enabled over here. Nav 1 is enabled over here. And let's switch these and see if that has an indication, because we're not seeing any difference over here when we change. If I go from nav 2, the active is 110.50. And it shows over here that nav 2 is enabled, but it shows that the active is 113.90. So let's see what happens if I switch. Now it says that the active is 110.50, and that's correct. If I switch again, they switched up here. So I can switch from nav 1. I can switch from the active to standby here. I just can't switch from nav 2 to nav 1. See, this says nav 1 is enabled, but it's not enabled up here. It's not the primary nav now. So in order to change the nav buttons, I've got to do that. That makes 110.50 the active. Change that. It changes over here as well. And I want to see if it changes the active and nav over here when I go to nav 2. Nav 2 is enabled. and it still says nav 1 up here. So it's not doing a very good job of staying up with even the changes that are made on this side. I think maybe if I tried to change these, it shows nav 1. The nav 1 active is 110.50, and now the nav 1 active is 113.90. Active. And don't want to use that yet. So switching between these two, I mean, it's not something that you normally do very often, so maybe that's not a big deal. But this is not working to switch between these nav 1 and nav 2. But I can switch from active to standby. I believe I can. Yeah, now the standby is 110.50, and now the 110.50 is active. So I can switch between nav 1 and nav 2 there. And let's see, somewhere I can go here. Oh, if I click on standby, then I get a new window here pops up, and I can change the frequency here. It also gives me a chance to change from nav 1 to nav 2 up here, but again, that's not working, so it doesn't make any difference. Maybe that would work. I just switched between the 2 and nav 2, and that does work. So that's another way. So I guess it does. This will only change it in the dialog box, but it doesn't change it up here. It doesn't change between the active navs. All right. Okay. Now the standby in nav 2 is 110.5. Let's go 109.4. See what that does. That's not going to be right, but now we go switch, and it got to the closest one, 10. No, it just didn't like what I entered. So let's go back and go 100. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. 1009. Now, how do we move that into .9? If I click enter, that just changed the standby of nav 2 to 108. All right. I'm not sure how that works. There ought to be a way. Backspace, back, find, okay. Let's click find, and let's find ILS, go. Oh, here's the ones. We can switch between these. And now, if I click OK here, 110.9, that goes up in the standby for nav 2. And over here, 110.9. Now transfer, and they are switched. And we can see that we've got a good radio here. All right, let's click OK or back. Clicking back closes it without changing anything, and so we've got this set up. And the comms are going to be the same way over here, so we're not going to spend much time there. Let's try to change from the COM 1 to COM 2. See if that happens. In order to do that, come over here and take a look. And COM 1 is still the active COM. So changing here did nothing to change between them. Let's click OK. I'll click back to come out and come down here and see if we can now we got COM 1, COM 2 showing. If I click COM 1, we get COM 1 enabled. Shows the COM 1 values. If I click COM 2 becomes active over here, but not over here. So these buttons are not useful. And I'm going to assume that this dialog box works about the same as the nav buttons do. I believe that would be the case. So what we can see here is that there's some functionality. We can swap between COM 1, COM 2, and I'll swap back. We can swap here again, so we can swap between COM 1, COM 2 radio frequencies, and have it show up in the thing. So the active frequency is 119.40, and if I click again, if I switch it, now the active frequency is 124.85, and now it's 119.4. And so the swapping works, but changing from nav 1, nav 2, or COM 1, COM 2, that does not work. That has to be done up here in the simulator. Well, I think that is all that we wanted to cover in this video. I don't know if this has been very helpful, but it may help you to see what can be done and cannot be done. Some of the things that can't be done from Pilot2ATC with the new version of Windows Microsoft Simulator, and give you an idea of whether or not this application is worth looking into. So take care of yourself, and let's see, where is my airplane at? Here it is, right. Well, it should be right there at Corpus Christi. It should be showing up there for some reason, and it's not. So why isn't my airplane showing up on the runway? That's interesting. Oh, because I haven't clicked on it yet. Well, I am connected. Wasn't I not connected? Yes, I'm connected. But it doesn't say connected. Something wrong. Let me disconnect and connect again. It's taking a long time to connect. I think if I were to close it and come back in, that might help it to connect again. Well, it shows that the simulator connected, the recognition engine installed, and the grammars are loaded, which are the three things that we look for. But this button is not showing that it's connected. So I'm going to close this, exit out of it, and we'll come back here and open it again. Hang on just a second while we get it started. Starts like this. Takes a little bit of time for it to load up its data. Got a lot of data it works with, so it takes a minute or so for this to happen. And so even though it connected a moment ago, it appeared that it was not able to get the aircraft position from the simulator. And that may be because of the order in which we open these things up. But that looks like a little bit of a bug with the application. I'm going to send that over to the programmer, and maybe he'll be interested in looking into that. But maybe not, because I did open them up in the wrong order. And it looked like Pilot2ATC closed down again. Let me see what happened there. Oh, there it is. Just took a minute for it to come up. All right, so now we are up and running. I'll click connect again. It just takes a long time to connect. Okay.
Corpus Christi International Information Alpha, 1951 Zulu winds are 086 at 9 knots. Visibility 10 miles. 3,400 few clouds. Temperature 28, dew point 19. Current altimeter is 3012. Arriving and departing runway 13.
Okay, so we came up
Corpus Christi International
with ATIS
Information Alpha,
running.
1951 Zulu winds are 086 at 9 knots.
Because
Visibility
that's
10
what
miles.
COM1 is set to.
3,400 few
Now I'm
clouds.
going to swap that, and that shuts up the ATIS. And there is my airplane. Close the flight plan. There's my airplane at Corpus Christi. Now there's the background. Again, I want to get rid of that, so I'm going to open up the config, and where do we go for that? Sounds maybe. Play chatter. We'll turn that off, and that gets rid of that background noise. Kind of interesting when you're actually flying, but it can also get on your nerves a bit. So we'll turn that off. That's just a matter of personal preference. But there's my airplane in Corpus Christi. It shows it right at the end of the runway, which is where I spawned at the airport when I started this session. So that's all that we have to say about Pilot2ATC. Maybe I'll have some more information about it later on when we I'm going to try to make some flights with Pilot2ATC and see how well I can make it work with the simulator. So if we can do that, then I'll have another video on this application. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Come back to this channel and find out what we have coming up.